this little session. So I apologize, but maybe even things that I'm going to say were already said and discussed here, so yet another apology. Use the time to do your text messages. And okay, so
what you don't hear is
if everything I said was already discussed here, because I wasn't here.
For the benefit of those who were not here last year, you said the same thing. Was she true to her work? Absolutely.
Okay. So these are my 2 cents, and about women in retirement. It's actually not really my area of research. Okay, stop apologizing. First, women and men do not get to retirement age equal. No, this is not. Okay, so I'm afraid that equalizing the retirement age will actually equalize the unequal, the different. Women's lifetime labor force participation consists of jobs that pay less, are less likely to be full-time, and less likely to accrue pension benefits. We see here 38% of women worked in part-time jobs in 2006 compared to 13% of men. Almost 47% of women had pension insurance in 2002 compared to 60% of men. 60% of the uninsured are, those that don't have pension insurance, are women. 40% of employed women in Israel in 2006 worked as nannies, kindergarten or elementary school teachers, secretaries, and housekeeping, occupations with not only low income but also difficulties in keeping jobs at an older age, and occupations that are becoming less and less protected, are paying less and more outsourced and based on short-term work contracts. Women are also more likely to be unemployed. Women's unemployment rates are higher than men. In 2006, these were 7.9% for women compared to 9% of men. And again, the world on which this statistics is based is not the world of the near future. So there is only so much that we can calculate what will happen to future generations based on the world that we know. The world is becoming more of casual work, less protected works, workers, less collective bargaining, and so forth. So this means that when women get to the age of 62 and want to retire without social security, which what will happen if the retirement age goes up, they are less likely to be able to do so because they have lousy pensions. And this also means that the exchange rate between the exchange rate that was presented here in the simulation does not really reflect the average experience of women. On average, they are less likely to have continuous full-time pension accruing employment since the age of 25. Okay, so this is the first point. Last year, Ellie was upset that I didn't talk long enough, remember? Okay, so, but we have seen in the earlier presentation and this presentation that raising the retirement age increases women's labor force participation. So these are presumably good news, presumably in support of the idea to raise the retirement age. But the question is not whether they participate. They are forced to participate. But the question is in what jobs. For example, what is their income? Let's see what I have here. Women work more, but in what jobs? So we know that the gender wage gap increases with age. It is about 82% in 24 to 34, in 25 to 34 ages, but it goes up to 68% in the ages of 65 and up.
What do you call wage here? It's not hourly wage, right?
It's
Total income, so it depends on how much they work.
okay. No, it's fine. No, that's the ratio, right? The wage gap as in ratio. Yeah, so women's wage is 82% of men's in the prime worker ages of 25 to 34, and women's wage goes down to 68% of men's wage in a 65 plus. Of course, it doesn't control for, but you don't want to control so because other things are not equal. Only 24% of women at age 65 and up worked in a full-time job compared to 56.1% of men. So women, again, they work but not in full-time jobs. More than three quarters of women in age 65 plus worked in part-time jobs compared to only 44% of men. The unemployment rate among women at 65 plus is much higher than men, 4.4% compared to 3.4%. That was in 2009. And this is the objective experience at work. There is also subjective experience at work. These are the jobs that they work not only pay less, not only they are part-time jobs, but there's also bad jobs in terms of this workers' status and appreciation at work. Just a quick example from last year's presentation from a self-help website of all the workers on Tapuz, where all the workers talk amongst themselves about keeping those jobs and not quitting. So just one article was titled "Working and Kicking," and the person said, so what if I'm harassed at work, I'm tough, and I'm not going to leave? The context of the discussion is we cannot leave these jobs, we will not have any other jobs. So also the subjective experience behind these bar charts is not as optimistic as the bar charts look. So basically raising the retirement age creates a job lock. Women are staying longer years in bad jobs. At least we need to make, or at least we need to make that an empirical question rather than just looking at their labor force participation. We need to look at the quality of that labor force participation. Older women are more likely to be working in bad jobs. I said that already. And again, all this is likely to become worse and worse as the neoliberal conception of employment and of worker protection takes over the economy, and it does. But women in bad jobs are doing much better than women with no jobs. Actually, of course, those that are in favor of raising the retirement age are aware of that. And as we heard here as well in any other recommendation to increase the retirement age, we also hear a recommendation to use public policy to prevent this higher unemployment among women or older workers, and to prevent a situation in which they are trapped, being forced to work but not getting work. But so everyone mentions using public policy to encourage the employment of older women, but we should understand that public policy is not a panacea, it's far from a panacea. Past experience with using public policy to change organizational behavior is really not promising for many reasons. I'll mention three here. First, any such policy will need to avoid the trap of employers hiring workers into bad jobs. The policy needs to make sure that employment is suitable for keeping the retirement forecast of the worker. This will require a very complicated policy directives and system and enforcement. And how long will it take to set up a policy like that and debug it? Years, in the best case. Second, employers tend to view loss of tax breaks or fines as expenses that enter their accounting system. Most of these policies talk about providing employers with incentives in the form of tax breaks to employ older workers. But for employers, they just put that in their accounting system, just like any other business expense. We see this in other legal arenas. We see that in the non-smoking laws, right? So for bars, they prefer to have the higher income from customers, from smoking customers, than to obey the law. In laws prohibiting work on rest days, in pollution laws, in all these cases we see that employers prefer to pay fines and break the law over compliance. And there is no reason that this will not be the same in the case of tax breaks for employing older workers, especially given the deeply rooted perception that older workers are less productive. Third, so this is the third reason why I'm worried about using public policy. Third, really a wide range of evaluation research shows that public policy aimed at changing employers' hiring and employment preferences have failed. In the US, both equal employment opportunity and affirmative action regulations had a very small effect on the employment of especially black men and women in the 1970s, when enforcement was high, and very active and very well funded, and when public sentiments were very much pro-civil rights after the 1960s. But those effects diminished in the 1980s with Reagan and never really regained life. It is difficult to say that Israel today looks like the US in the decade post-1960s. So even if we have some historical evidence to some success, I think it belongs to the past. Furthermore, research shows that even when executives put in place measures and structures to change hiring patterns, so even in cases where executives are, okay, give me these tax breaks, I'm going to employ older workers, even then these measures often fail. Sometimes they even backfire. And one reason is that bias against older workers is very deep. Any public policy to encourage employment of older workers will have to undo very deeply ingrained ageism, conscious or unconscious bias against older workers and older age more generally. One of the special challenges of remedying ageism as opposed to sexism or racism is that it is the most socially acceptable basis for discrimination at work. Just think about the common job ads. Come to work in a young and dynamic environment. Can you imagine a parallel job ad? Come to work in our white and dynamic environment, or our masculine and dynamic environment? No. But when you see young and dynamic, you don't even think twice. You don't see it. It became transparent. Our preference to the young and our lack of preference or rejection from the old is so ingrained in us that we don't see it. And last year, I talked more about why public and organizational policies to reduce ageism don't look promising. I mentioned that HR discourse, the human resources managers who have been in charge of translating public policy to organizational reality, they themselves place the responsibility for avoiding discrimination on the individual older workers. So we see in HR journals, we see advice such as familiarize yourself with new technologies, such as email, for example. So I also mentioned last year the economic logic of ageism, which means that when managers discriminate against older candidates or workers, they do not feel as if they are doing something wrong. And I also mentioned last year that the law itself is less assertive regarding age compared to other categories. Age has really become transparent as a basis for discrimination, so much that even the academic research on ageism is ageist. So here is a New York Times articles that I read last night. Or here are some quotes from a New York Times articles that I read last night about ageism. I actually read it a couple of days ago. It's written here. Whatever. You're not laughing, so you're not with me. Are you with me? Wait. Okay, so that article interviewed... I went back because I want to say that article interviewed prominent scholars that write on ageism, that published books, and they sit in they direct centers for retirement. For example, Peter Capelli, that until I read that, I was a great admirer of him. I'm done with him. Peter Capelli, the director of the Center for Human Resources at the Wharton School, is the author of a forthcoming book about managing the older workforce, and he gives advice. Managing older workers, in fact, doesn't require rocket science, but it does require a more collaborative approach that respects their expertise and engages their interest. In other words, simply offer them In other words, yes, they're different, but all you need to do is change your management style and hope to catch their interest, and then you're fine. Another professor, another management professor, Alicia Manel, is Peter Drucker Professor of Management Science at the Boston College, and the director of the college's Center for Retirement Research. He says all the workers have a lifetime preferences and skill, but they are essentially unique shaped pegs that can fit into limited number of holes. This is the pro-aged research.
Unbelievable. Wait, stay. Peter Drucker wrote most of his books
Uh-huh.
after retirement age.
Okay. Most of these, yeah. Okay. Lawrence Kotlikoff, professor of economics. Employers should simply pay you less with age. There is no need so they say just pay them less. No need to lay off them, just pay them less. And the painful truth is our productivity peaks in our mid-40s and gradually declines with age. That's the truth, says the professor.
He himself is 60 years old.
Self-proclaimed candidate for the U.S. presidency.
Yes, he runs for the
Just now.
I don't think I didn't put the last the last one from a woman, chairwoman of the Economic Policy Analysis at the New School for Social Research, which is quite regarded as quite radical. She says employer may find older workers attractive if they don't have to provide health insurance. Okay. So, but the undoing of deeply embedded biases cannot end with tax breaks for employment, also because biases hit all the workers at every step of the way throughout their employment, not only in hiring. It's not like you will succeed hiring them and that's it. And I want to give you an example from a good job in a manufacturing, in a successful manufacturing.
עד שיגיעו כאן לתקן את המחשב, תשמעו למה אנחנו צריכים לעשות היום. אני רוצה לחזור גלובלית על הקורס, לסכם אותו כאשר יש דברים שמשתש.
Sounds like...
קבוצה לקבוצה, לא תמיד...
So this is an example from a good job in a good successful manufacturing job. The example comes from a research I've been conducting with my collaborator Uri Shved and with the generous support of Clal and Chaya and Eli. This is why I'm here, no? That's why I came. We're looking at the work histories of workers in an international manufacturing company. We're trying to trace their experiences throughout their careers and as they age. This is only the first piece of this research. We analyzed the effect of age on workers' performance rating. So here, this company has a performance system that is pretty common these days. It has two stages. In the first stage, managers give workers a performance score that is the average of their performance. Of their performances, of their productivity items, how much they sold or how many deadlines they met, depending on their specific occupations. So the first stage is an average performance rate, and it's very tied to the performance. The second stage of the performance system is a final performance rate that is basically it can be lower or higher than the average rate, and it basically symbolizes or reflects the manager's discretion regarding that worker, that evaluated worker. The idea is to take the average performance scores and create a distribution, because the executives don't want all performance scores to be high. Managers have a tendency to give high performance scores to their employees just to be nice and not to create tension for future years. So the system forces a distribution that will create real distinctions between workers. So we have the first stage, which is closely related to the... Okay, we have the first stage that is closely related to productivity. The second stage is forcing a distribution over the first stage.
How?
But basically, the specific distribution here is a unified distribution of fifth, 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 fifth. So fifths of the worker have to get one, fifths have to get two, fifths have to, okay? Like standardizing it. So once after managers have the averages, they have to move some up, they have to move some down, and they do it on their own discretion. There is no systematic way to do it. So what we checked is whether age, defined here as experience, affects the average score and whether it affects the final score. If it affects the average and not the final, it means that it affects the discretion. And now I have no idea how this... I just put them on the slide, so I apologize. These are the multivariate regressions, and we see here that years of relevant experience, which is our measure for age, have no effect on the average performance review score. In the sales department, we took the sales department because in sales, the productivity is very clear. You have a quota and you have how much you achieve relative to the quota. There is no discretion. It is an occupation in which there is least discretion in the average score. So we see that there is no effect of years of relevant experience. We control for, you see.
What kind of regression is that? Because I mean, if the standard deviation is so small and the coefficient is like that, it should be actually significant if it's an OLS or if it's something standard. I'm trying to understand how come it's not significant. I mean, you have a coefficient that is.
למה? זה היה יוצא לך את השניים.
כמעט אחד. כמעט אחד.
These results are robust to different definitions, but in this case I think it's an OLS. And what we see here that when we look at factor affecting the final performance score, we see that there is a negative effect of the years of relevant experience. So there is no, so experience, which is again our measure for age, does not affect the average score, the score that is close to performance, but it does affect the final score, the score that also has a discretionary component in it. So, okay, so this suggests for us a bias against older workers as their average scores is the same as younger workers. But the issue at stake is not only about ageism, but rather ageism against women. Not only women are doing worse in these ages because of life history of discrimination, as we discussed earlier, but also ageism is not gender blind. Ageism is worse when it comes to women. Older men are perceived, for example, older men are perceived as more attractive than younger men compared to how older women are perceived in relation to younger women. For men, white hair is perceived as a sign of wisdom and status. For women, white hair is perceived as a sign of decline. An American survey of a nationally representative samples shows that women are perceived to have reached at their maximum prestige and expected value at a lower age than men. One study shows that these ages are 48 for men and 44 for women. In short, women start facing ageism at a younger age, and women indeed report more ageist stereotypes at a younger age. I will conclude, I think, with an illustrative example. I ran into last night of last year. I also showed that example last year as I was reading a newspaper article, again making the point in favor of hiring older women. So the article says an older female worker should be thought of as madame, someone that has seen much and knows how to deal with all situations. And this is why you want to employ her. The author does mention, however, that you shouldn't repeat that term in public. In short, whatever we know about ageism, we should consider that it is worse for women. So in relation to policy, I would recommend a careful approach to the policy goal of increasing the employment of older workers and older women. And furthermore, based on what we know about the effectiveness of public policy, I would recommend waiting with changing the retirement age until we have that policy out and about and implemented well and showing some results. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
בכיתה סמוכה מלמדים עם מיקרופון כזה.
Somewhere. אבל לא אליי, the questions are not...
Okay. Questions? Comments?
Okay, so first of all, I would like to make a few comments, and I would like to start with an anecdote. I will try to be careful with my comments because you said that you're no longer like any of those people you quoted, so that's a bit frightening. Anyway, one of the things that someone needs to keep in mind is what are we exactly dealing with? Are we dealing with inequality in general? Are we dealing with aging in general? Are we dealing with the pension system, which means actually that we are trying to make the best system for saving for retirement? And typically, economists like to target the problems that they are dealing with. So if you want to deal with how to make the best pool of savings for the future, then you target that. If you want to do other things like a better employment environment and things like that, then you basically target that. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because, as Karnita showed, there are few things that goes opposite of what you would like if you want people to have enough when they retire. Since systems are supposed to be actually fair and solvent, if a woman works less, which is what you showed us in the first slides, and it has less better jobs, so basically worse jobs, as you showed us, then she actually accumulates also less. So if she wants to maintain a decent standard of living, she's supposed to actually save more time, not less time. Now, if you add to that the fact that she will live longer, then she needs to save more time, because she will be more time in that situation in which she actually needs to use those savings. So both elements, how much you work, how much you gain, and how much you will use it, actually means that females are supposed to retire later than males. Now, the question arises, why, when people started all those systems, they actually started, most of them in the world, with the age difference between male and female. Because most of them actually knew the problem that I'm talking about. Why did they make such a difference? Now, many people don't know that, but the reason that they did that has nothing to do with economics. It's a romantic reason. They basically wanted male and female to retire at the same time. There was an age difference in marriage between men and women, and they looked at the future life of a retiree, and they said a household should retire together.
If I can comment on it, they wanted women to take care of the men, and they went home and they didn't want a power difference at home where women still work and earn money and the men are pension and do nothing. So it's not so romantic. It's more patriarchal than romantic.
No, actually, okay. I can discuss that with you with some evidence, actually, that there are discussions in the past that raise that. But a woman can take care of the man as long as he is alive. Once he's dead, that's not really relevant. So basically, since she lives longer, it still shouldn't be there. But the point is, the point. Exactly. Now the point is that even if we take that logic, that as economists potentially doesn't mean much to us, today the age difference in marriage is very small. Today the age difference has converged from what used to be 6-7 years of difference between male and female in the 50s when Social Security in Israel started, to about 3 and actually less than 3, 2.5 years of difference in age of marriage. That's nice. I took the average of all of them, but that's fair. So basically, there you have another reason why you potentially would like to have a difference in age retirement that is actually slightly smaller. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you both, very interesting. Only two comments. One is that I think that the analysis is very important. I only will be very careful because we only, you're showing 1 year, 2 years of effect, and I think that we have to be a little bit careful and wait a little bit of what are the effects. It's different that when you have 1 year and you have few people than when you have more. And I think that, and another comment is that it always worries me in general, but especially talking about the older population, is the definition of unemployment. Because you know that unemployment, and I know that from at older populations, is that the people give up. So they're not looking for jobs. So they're not defined as unemployed. But it doesn't mean that they're not unemployed. So especially when we're dealing here with this issue, the indicator is very important.
Could I take the opportunity to ask a question? Why should governments care about retirement age? If a pension system is actuarially fair, then it's sort of neutral to when people retire. And why couldn't we leave that entirely to the individual and have labor laws that are completely neutral to age?
We talk about women because we know that women are discriminated or disadvantaged in the labor market, but there are other groups that are disadvantaged in the labor markets. We just saw the Arabs, who have very low participation rate at older age, people in low-wage jobs and so on. Why not consider their differential age of retirement for these people? And I know that one of the major arguments of the women's organization against raising the retirement age was because people cannot get Social Security money. And for people who have very low wage, this is a major part of their income. Usually they don't even have a pension, another pension. So why not consider all the working poor in Israel, which are a big group now, and lower their retirement?
One thing that maybe it should be put on the table that women are against raising the retirement age because they say, well, we are discriminating against in so many places. This is the place we want to be compensated for it. So you have to put that on the table and say, well, this is what we want. We want to get our compensation, and that's it. And also, my feeling is that also women enjoy retirement more than men. I don't know if there are studies about that, but they don't mind being at home, and the men maybe are not very happy with being at home.
Those people that you saw before.
Next year, you're up there.
So you should put that on the table.
But I don't want to put that on the table because it's not true. Why? that the case for retirement is compensation for discrimination, no?
Okay, so my first comment actually, or my first response is similar to what Claude mentioned, and I think that the fact that women have lower wages, that they work less hours, and that they have shorter and more interrupted career means that actually their replacement ratio or their income once they retire will be much lower, and that only calls for more savings. So I'm not sure what I don't see the argument here for actually not raising the retirement age. And if you say that there is a problem in actually applying public policy that will help reduce the discrimination, and then you say, well, let's do it sequentially. First do that and only then raise retirement age. I think that you means, when I take the two parts together, it means actually postponing the raising of retirement age more or less indefinitely. And what does it mean in terms of the overall pension eventually that women will have, given that now their pensions are tied to what they actually save? And what does it mean in terms of the soundness of the Social Security? And that brings me to actually your question, why do governments care? I think that if we're talking about Social Security, the soundness of the Social Security is the government's problem. I don't think that the government can just ignore it and say, well, right. By the way, the eligibility for Social Security old age pensions is something that is by law. The government has committed itself to actually pay the Social Security payments to older people. So it's a commitment, and the government should make sure that it will actually have the resources to pay that. And that's why I think the soundness and the actuarial balance of the Social Security is very much the problem of the government. I don't see it being anybody else's problem. Regarding the issue that you raised about the discouraged women actually leaving the labor force, we did look at that. We didn't only look at the unemployment rate, which hasn't risen. By the way, it's lowest among the older. It's not rising with age. But we also looked at the discouraged, we also looked, and actually the Bureau of Statistics is also collecting data not only on what is defined as unemployed, but also at the discouraged worker. People that say that they didn't think that they will have a job and therefore they just leave the labor market. There wasn't any increase in their discouraged workers. So it wasn't that we saw more women just leaving the labor market. That was not the case. So that was looked at and there was no evidence to that. Well, regarding your question about the poor workers, I think that I think there is a need to deal with poor workers. I mentioned in the previous session the issue of earned income tax credit that would raise the income of poor workers. I think that should be applied and should be broadened and should be also raised. But I think that it's a different issue, and the issue of actually making sure that women save enough to have decent or reasonable income for their old age cannot be. I mean, I think we should really separate the questions or separate the issues and separate the policy measures to deal with each of these issues. That's my point.
אלי אמר, אפשר להעביר, יש לי את זה, קיוויתי, I was hoping to have 2 more minutes. I don't know now what I wrote. So, first, the point about women's worse job profile during their lifetime before retirement age, the point that was first and foremost to say that simulation assumptions are flawed. To produce a simulation based on the assumption of working and continuous pension accruing full-time jobs since the age of 25 is just not realistic. So this is why I mentioned that. Now, what you took it to say, okay, well, they earn less, so in a very rational, isolated, fragmented world that economists, I learn now, live in, it means that they are supposed to also be paid less. So it's good for them to increase the entire retirement age because then they have the option to actually accrue more money, save more money for their pension, so they can actually enjoy the pension. So first, so there are a few things to say here. First, my understanding of the law from reading your the PowerPoint that your Hebrew PowerPoint. My understanding of the law is that now women can retire at 62, but they're not required, but they have the option to retire at 62 and get the social insurance. Okay, so that's increasing the retirement age basically takes that option. So they cannot get their social insurance at 62; they can get it later. So if women that didn't earn much, they didn't save much until 62, they're rational actors. They can say, "I'm not retiring now. I want to continue saving." Women that either saved enough or cannot find a job, or cannot find a job that will actually pay off relative to if they retire, because their job prospects deteriorate with time, as we see in the statistics, those women can say, I am taking my right to retire at 62. So I don't understand why the law forcing women to retire is benevolent in this way. So, again, the point is women don't have the chance to continue their savings later on. Second, we know that one reason why women work less is their family responsibilities. Women raise kids. Women raise a public good that is called kids, that called children, that is called our future workforce. So once women start getting compensated for raising kids, that might help their savings, and they will not have to work longer to up their savings. They will be compensated for the reasons their savings are lower. Now, I don't think that women need the 62, the lower retirement age, to compensate for discrimination. These two things are the relationship between these two things, to put it this way, I think is a little bit convoluted. There is discrimination from pre-labor market discrimination, but from the first day in labor market, and it continues through retirement. So it's a continuation of discrimination. It's not a compensation so if you increase women's retirement age, you force them to work more in bad jobs, in jobs that are getting worse, and they're getting worse because of their age and because they're women. If you do that, you're not taking away their compensation for discrimination. You are actively discriminating them even more, because you're putting them in a situation in which they are discriminated even more as elder workers and women. If you reduce that gap, if you make them as discriminated as men for their age, then...
But right now you're giving them a present. The
What?
present is early retirement.
And 24 years old.
You're giving them a present.
But what is the alternative? What is the alternative?
Why they should get a present?
Because they don't have it's not a present, because when they get into when they are in the labor market, when you take this safe harbor, the safety net, when you take it out, their experience is not as the comparable male.
But you give them
So you
24 years of allowance compared to 16 years of allowance for men. It's a very huge gap.
but that women earn.
It's not the same.
Yeah, but Kani, that women live more, you can attribute it to the same range of reasons why they also earn less from the get-go, right? So you cannot take it here as a reason for policy and ignore it on this side as a reason for policy, right? No, so I agree with, I'm sorry, what is your name? I agree with Claude that it's good that economists take, I don't really agree, but you say economists take a problem and they solve it. So first there is, of course, you turn a blind eye to the interconnectedness of social areas, but you have a problem of, there is a problem of, social insurance or pension system that is going to become non-solvent. That's legit. It's a legitimate problem. The question is, what is a legitimate solution? The problem doesn't. The legitimacy of the problem doesn't entail legitimacy of the first solution that comes to mind.
First of all, you have to recognize that there is a need for a solution, and then
That's fine. That's fine.